All right, everybody, welcome back to the weekly show with Jimmy and Joe. Back at it. Last week, we were all traveling all over the place trying to figure out what we were going to do. So Jimmy took care of it with Joy, which was better than me. People have been calling, they're like, when's Joy coming back? I was gone for 1 week, people. 1 week, man. What are you going to do? So we're excited to be back, talk to you about leadership today, because when we talk about leadership, it's in all ways, but it's leadership always in terms of how we can move people forward. So we're really excited about today and to talk about some of the things that are going on, not only within the context of our own space, but anywhere across the country. And we would love to have you join in. So if you want to join in, we're going to put the video, or the link is available. Pop into the chat. Talk to us about, popping in and talking about some of the things that are going on in your world, how we can lead better together, and what that really looks like. And I think what we need to understand is that we're much better together. And so if this is just about me and Jimmy coming on Saturday morning and talking about what we're doing, that's fine for the two of us. But come on, people, we need your help, man. Come on in, jump in, talk about the great things that are going on, because I get sick of listening to myself talk, and I know I get sick of listening to him talk. So the more that we can get you guys on here, we would love to do that. So please jump in, ask questions. If you're on the Twitter feed right now and you want to ask a question there that we can answer, we can try to get to that. You want to pop in, we'll talk about that. But the community is where we grow all the leaders around us. And community, actually, that reminds me of kind of like what's going on this week in Fall Creek. I'm in my office right now, but Jimmy, in about an hour, we've got a ton of people coming back in because it's our alumni tournament weekend, our alumni basketball tournament. And last night I was here watching games, and I'm just going to tell you, I just sat here and I smiled for like 2 hours, because there were people coming back from all over the place just to play basketball and connect with the friends from when they were in high school. And it was an unbelievable experience, because we haven't been able to do it in a couple of years. So when they come back in, and they get to connect with their friends, and they talk, and they play a little basketball. Some a little bit slower than they were when they left here, right? But that's right. They're still playing. They're still playing. Some are not, which is amazing to me, okay? But they come back, they play, they hang out with their friends, they talk. They got a chance to walk through the building that they haven't seen in a couple years, and we did all these renovations. So just the idea that they come home and they get to connect and they get to talk about what it used to be like and smile about that means the world to me. And I just sat and I smiled. I mean, we're just in a spot where a lot of people are doing some really great work, and we want to make sure that we highlight that. But nights like last night remind me of how important it is to connect with the community, because, man, they were super fun when they got here. How are you, my man?
I'm doing good, buddy. Yeah, those are awesome. When you're just mentioning that, takes me back to like the Masterson days. That's what they called it at our school, when the faculty would play the students. And
oh yeah,
that was always a good time. I was always just on the edge of my seat though, because I was just waiting for who was going to be the first person to blow the Achilles or tear out the Achilles or tear the ACL. So that's always a little nerve wracking. So
I tell you, we had that yesterday too. We had the fifth. Yeah, that's right. This not the ACL, but the staff versus the fifth grade basketball game, which is so fun. Oh my goodness, those. And so on the staff versus the fifth grade game, we bring, they all get introduced. We get the band. The band is there. The high school band plays. Mm-hmm. They do the Star Spangled Banner. The choir does the Star Spangled Banner. All the kids, K5, are in the gym cheering. They got signs for either the staff or for the fifth graders. And every single basket, you would think that somebody won a state title. I know. Because every basket, these kids are just going bananas. It was so fun. We didn't have any injuries that I know about at this point. We had a lot of tired staff when it was done. But, man, it was so fun to watch them work. It was a great day of connection. So I was just so happy about it. I didn't play because I got hangnail, and I can't be expected to play through injury. I got hangnail. I'm fragile, Jimmy. I'm fragile.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I just had to kind of step back a little bit.
You know how they talk about turf toe, Joe? It's kind of like court toe for you, right?
Little court I wasn't toe even that. I was just tired, man. That's all there is to it. So, we're talking about the idea that we wanted to start with was, how do we build community connections? And one of the things that's really important about schools and school leadership that I don't think people really get right away is the fact that we can have people cheering for us in our school. We can have people connecting with our school, and our parents are going to go out and shout and talk about the great stuff and that kind of thing. But what we have to understand is that 80% of the voting public don't have kids in school. So when 80% of the voting public don't have kids in school, that means 80% of the voting public are making a judgment about school based on what happened to their kids when they were in school, or to themselves when they were in school.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell that story. So nights like yesterday, days like yesterday, and nights like last night are really important to not only show off what's going on in the school, but bring back connections of all the things that are happening. And I think when we can connect to our parents and talk about the stuff that's going on, that's great. But how do we connect to the other 80% to make sure that when they're out in the public talking about the work that happens in school, that they're not only informed about it, but they're also excited about it? And those can be two different things, to be really honest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anytime we can be intentional on how we're going to bring the community into the school, that first of all, that's already a win right there.
Right.
And one thing I'd always, ask and challenge, I should say, our schools is be really intentional in looking around saying, how are we inviting our community into our school, and what does that look like, and how do we do that? So, again, obviously I had two schools, Joe, that were in a community, which means right in the neighborhoods. And as we know, when that happens, there's all the potential for negativity from neighborhood families because of the way kids drive.
Yep.
Parking illegally, blocking driveways, leaving trash, sometimes just gathering. Those types of things can sometimes create issues with our neighbors. And then the perception begins that our kids are, these kids and those kids, and they're terrible, and all kids do this. And it just kind of creates that negative undercurrent, especially when it comes to high school, because, they have a perception about how high school's kids drive, right? And I want to remind them all the time, though, to be honest, that typically in my experience, the parents were worse than the kids were in terms of driving, like pickup lanes and drop off lanes and those types of things. But when those types of things exist, then we have to be really intentional in combating that somehow. So whether that's working with our students, first of all, to be really intentional and recognize that we have neighbors in the around our school, and to understand that they are our neighbors, so we have to be really respectful of that. But what can we do intentionally maybe to support the neighbors? So does that mean during the winter when it snows, can we be intentional in saying, hey, we've got groups of kids that will come out and shovel the walks and shovel the driveways. Summertime, we have kids that will come, or fall, rake the leaves and those types of things. But it was also just going out and literally handing out free tickets to events.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
We have the fall, winter, the fall play, winter musical, whatever happens to be the case, inviting the community in for free, because the more they can see the kids, right, in a really positive light, the more they'll carry the banner for our students in our school. So volunteering, supporting our neighbors in different ways, and being just really intentional in that. I thought were always really positive ways, especially for those schools that are right in neighborhoods.
Right. And also trying to figure out how you can connect to local businesses to have those conversations too, because those are the parents. They may not be the parents of the kids in your school, but they're also parents of kids in other schools, right?
Yeah, right.
And if that's the case, now if we're the ones being talked about, it changes the conversation about what we do. We've been live streaming basketball games for I want to say like 9 years. Like we were really early on the roll in terms of getting things streamed out. So we would get comments and cards and emails from people from all over the country, aunts, uncles, grandparents, just that weren't able to see their kids play basketball, their grandkids play basketball during the year. We were able to get that to them. And those conversations don't just happen, within the email. They happen within the community that those people are a part of. And that gets the conversation going. We have a local nursing home, and so we took a TV down there, and then we just put a new TV in their common room and just streamed all the stuff there. We want them to be part of what we do. I mean, if they can't always get here, then we got to make sure that we're part of what they're doing. We take kids there and sing during, right before the Christmas holiday, and little things like that that just kind of keep people connected to the school. Because if they don't feel like they're connected to the school on their terms, that's another big thing. It's got to be on their terms, not ours. It's not like, well, come in. We'd love to have you come in. We'd love to have you come in. Like, that's great to say out loud, but they're not going to do it. And a lot of people didn't have a really great school experience. So how can we go to them to make sure that those things are happening on a regular basis? Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's, again, streaming an event. Sometimes it's going there to actually have a conversation with people. Sometimes it's, dropping some. I had a conversation with a guy that owns a gas station in town. I said, you want to sell some Go Cricket stuff at your gas station? Just do it, man. Do it. You don't have to go through us. You're not going to step on our toes. Just do it. That's fine. Any way we can get the stuff out, the better. I drove by the marquee at the gas station and said "Go Crickets" on it. And I'm like, come on now. This is what we're all about. These are the kinds of, this is the momentum that we can get outside of the school walls, outside of the school day. That's what we really want to think about moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think just that personal invitation, right? The personal invite, the face-to-face always makes a difference too. It's funny you said that. I forgot all about the fact that at the last school I worked at, we had a nursing home across the street as well. And that's exactly right. Whether we'd go over there and have kids go over there, obviously, I still know that we had kids that would go over there and play checkers or play chess or play board games, right? And be just really intentional in doing that. A lot of musical stuff, like you said, the choruses and so forth, they always love that, right? Especially around the holidays. And just reminding and having kids in their presence, there's just something powerful about that, whether they're elementary kids or middle school kids or high school kids. So hopefully those are things that in our schools right now as leaders that we're being really intentional, looking around the community, looking around the neighborhood. Great point about the businesses, Joe. I always do worry, right? We're constantly asking businesses for money, donations, right? Can you donate? Can you give money? And I, it's always a good reminder that these are partnerships for a reason. It can't just be one way. Give me. So how are we helping and supporting the businesses, right? So it should be reciprocal in some way. And so always loved inviting parents in, community business people, like you said, Joe, whether it was, hey, not always asking for money, but just being a part, coming to the banquets, recognizing them, coming into judge events, right, for us. They always loved that, it seemed like, right? We always had really cool things, trebuchet contests. We had the cardboard. See if I can say that real quick 3 times. Cardboard boat races.
Yeah,
right? Those were always cool. By the way, Joe, for the record, just so you know, I should put a picture up here. I won the boat race one year.
You did?
I did it.
You won the cardboard boat?
I didn't make the boat.
Oh, okay.
The kids made the boat.
That doesn't matter. Then you did nothing.
This is the boat that's going to win. I'll be honest with you, Joe. I thought for sure it was a trap. It was going to go out there and just sink. And so the whole time I was nervous. I was like, when's it coming? When's it going to happen? Because you actually had to go out. Is it like in a lagoon?
Yeah.
And you go out and go around this little island and you come back and it was a time thing. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is going to be sabotaged. They're going to pull the plug and this is going to go, they're going to wait till I get to the middle. So that never happened. So,
well, they didn't talk to me because if they would talk to me, I would have done it. I would definitely would have done it to you.
That's right. So that's exactly right. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the idea, just in terms of how we move that forward with people is really just think about like who is in your community and how do you get them to be part of the work that's happening so you can connect them. So sometimes it's just doing an audit of the businesses in town and actually sending out a survey. How would you like to be involved in what we do here? Is there anything that we can do for you? What kind of things are going on? Like, if we can give them, if the owners of businesses in town, go give them a Go Cricket shirt. Like say, hey, we want you to be around. And if there's anything we can do for you, just let us know. But love to give you a shirt and just wear it with pride kind of stuff. So little things like that go a long, long way in terms of connecting to the public. And I've been so lucky to be part of a community that values schools, but more importantly than that, they just value people. And so even when things get really tough, and they have a couple times gotten really tough where we end up on two sides of an argument, it's always done respectfully. And I think that, that comes with building a relationship with people where they know and understand that when it's all said and done, we're still going to be here talking. So we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to have conversations about stuff. And I think that's been really helpful for us.
Joe, I was in schools this week. I was in Bismarck Public Schools. We talked a lot this week, just about reframing. I still think, obviously, especially this time of the year, we talked about this a couple shows ago, that how difficult it is when you're closing down a school year and opening up a school year at the same time, right? We're already into 2022, 23, and so forth. We just talked about this idea of how to reframe it, because a lot of what's happening is the reality is the job is always going to be complex. It's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be coming at us 100 miles an hour. That is never going to go away. Right. I don't care what job you're working in right now.
Right.
It doesn't matter what field. And we just have to sometimes I keep things in perspective. And so I was reminding a principal this week that part of the issue is I feel like, again, because we put this pressure on it, by nature, a lot of us as leaders are fixers.
Right.
And just a reminder that we can't fix everything and we can't solve every problem, solve every issue. And we put a lot of pressures on ourselves to do that, right? I think administrators, leaders of districts and campuses do put a lot of pressure on themselves to try to solve these issues because they don't want others to have to deal with that, right? And that's how they see themselves as servant leaders. So one way maybe to reframe that for those leaders out there that are maybe struggling a little bit with that is, don't put the pressure on you that you have to fix everything and solve everything. But there's a couple ways to look at it. One, we know to be intentional and bringing other people into the circle to help us lead that charge, lead that change, to address an issue that's happening in our schools. It's really important, but even that can be a little dangerous sometimes if we're always going to the same people.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder again, as we work this week, it was so powerful to watch a leader work with their building leadership team to ask for support and just how they were willing to be a part of that issue and try to work through that. But yet being really intentional to make sure that we were going out to the rest of the staff to also get their voice. And so it's a reminder again, just be careful right now, leaders, especially this time of the year. I'm always worried that when they're in high stress situations, when people are volatile, when they're exhausted, that sometimes we can behave in ways that are not our best selves. And we have to give grace, obviously, to our staff. And it's also a good reminder that if we can do that for our staff, then how are we really intentional reminding staff that kids can also sometimes at this time of the year not be at their best selves as well. And so maybe rather than trying to solve or fix the problems, what if we reframed it and said, well, what do I bring to this situation? How can I bring a better version of me to this issue or to this situation? And what I've learned is if I can be really intentional in doing that, I almost always get a better result. I may not fix the problem or solve it, but I will get a better result because I'm changing me. And that's the one thing I would say about leadership. And I saw someone share it again last night, this idea of rather than look around the perimeter, look inward, look here internally first and start here and say, what have I done or what could I have maybe done to contribute to that issue? Because when it comes to problem solving and fixing issues, even when we think we solved the problem, we know in this job, because the variable is so unpredictable, that as soon as we think we solved it or figured it out, a variable shifts and we have to kind of start over again.
Right.
And so that's one thing I would encourage our leaders is just be really intentional and reminding themselves at this time of the year, especially, to pause and slow down and kind of think through it a little bit and think about how are you going to create an experience that when you walk away, people will carry the banner for you or carry the banner for your school, because that means you manage yourself. And when we do that more effectively, then we almost always get a better result.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about the idea that, every interaction matters because every interaction could be the one that they talk about for the rest of their lives. And when we're in a tough spot from a stress standpoint or anxiety standpoint, those interactions are actually more important because those might be volatile in some capacity, and that might be what they take away. I don't love that every time I walk into an interaction that it might be the one that they talk about forever. But if I acknowledge that it's real, then it changes the way that I walk into that conversation because I know and understand that that might be the one thing that they talk about forever. Again, I don't have to love that, but I do have to acknowledge that it's real. And that changes the behavior in which I walk into the conversation because I know and understand that it might be the one thing that they talk about forever. And I want to be remembered a certain way. And if you want to be remembered a certain way, then you have to make sure that you're acting in a certain way that you want to be remembered, right? And sometimes that gets really, really difficult because of the situations that you've been brought in and because you don't have the answer, all the time. The other thing that you mentioned, Jimmy, that I think is really important for people to understand is that whole version or that whole mentality of the fixer, of the problem solver, of I can fix it for you, I can do it for you. Two things happen if you end up being the fixer, if you end up being the doer of all this stuff, and you're not bringing other people in. You just say, well, it's easier for me to do it. I'm just going to do it myself, right? Two things end up happening. The first thing that ends up happening is that you get burned out. You're going to get burned out because you're going to start doing all this other stuff. And then the things that you're truly responsible for are getting missed because you're doing all this other stuff, right? The second thing that happens is that you become more of a help desk versus a helper. right? And so when that happens, and when you're the help desk, when you're like tech support help desk, right? Like you're always fixing, what ends up happening is the people that really truly want to move forward and need some help, but also want to own it, they stop asking you because they know you're just going to fix it. So why would they ask you for help and, to work together and help when they know you're just going to fix it and move on? So they stop asking for help. But the other group that just wants it done, that doesn't really want to own it, they just want to get it done, they'll keep asking. So now you're throwing in all the stuff that people don't want to do, don't want to own, don't want to move forward with just because they want it done. And now you've empowered that group to just get that stuff taken care of, right? I understand that we want to take stuff off of people's plates. I get that. But at the same time, if we're not moving people forward together and creating some ownership of all of it, then essentially at some point it's all going to kind of bottleneck together, and then you got real problems. Yep. So if we can create capacity to lead, and sometimes it's about asking the question, what are we looking for? Can I help you with, if you're looking for help in this area, how can we do this together? What would that look like for you? Do you need a resource to get this done? Do you need any resource that you can have to get this done better, right? Can I find a resource for you? That kind of thing, instead of just taking it over and say, well, I'll get it taken care of and I'll tell you when it's done, right?
Yeah. Amy in the on the thread makes a good point, again, reminding us about building capacity, right? If we're doing it all by ourselves. And it's a good reminder, right? Especially if people are coming and asking us, whether they're sharing an issue or a concern or even a complaint. And again, we can be a little bit more strategic in leadership rather than just jump in and want to give solutions, right? Or saying, hey, I'll take care of that. Mm-hmm. What if we just changed our language a little bit and said things like, why are you sharing that with me?
Right.
Well, how can you and I work together to address that issue, right? Rather than one individual do it, it's the idea of a partnership or working together to solve those issues. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we know that, right? We get concerned that people are coming to us over and over. We have to ask ourselves, why are they coming to us over and over? And then we can also fall into the trap of labeling these individuals who are doing that, but without realizing that we are too, or perhaps creating some of that issue. So if you are just joining us, and if there is a problem of practice right now that you're dealing with in your schools, or a thought you had, or something you've observed, or even something in your past that you've dealt with as a school leader, drop it in the chat here, and Joe and I will address, and hopefully some other people here will join us and giving their input and feedback, and how do we work through some of these things, because we're talking about leadership, because we know it's always about leadership. So again, if you're interested, throw a problem of practice in here. We'll take a look at it, and we'll certainly have a conversation about that. Joe, on top of this, as we're talking about building capacity and people coming to us and so forth, we kind of fall back in that idea of time management. I was talking to a principal this week, and there were a couple things that were happening in that conversation. One was, it's a good reminder, again, leaders, is that I just encourage us to be really, really careful about how much we're investing in our students and our staff and our own school community, and therefore neglecting those in our own homes. Mm-hmm. And I think that can come out in different ways, right? It's one thing to be not available or not accessible, but there's another thing of being home and just not being present, right? And so sometimes we as leaders, because we have so much going on and so much on our minds, and sometimes we're stressed out, without even realizing that other people in our homes, whether it's our children or our spouses, will sense a disconnect.
Yeah.
And that disconnect begins to create, it's like Joe, you always say, like, in the absence of knowledge, people will make up their own, or, when we're not clear in something, right, people will create their own narrative about things. And so all these things are reminders that how important it is to communicate. So one thing I would share with our leaders right now is kind of do the seek permission thing, or ask for permission. In other words, allow your spouses or allow your children to know, hey, I know daddy sometimes isn't going to be the most present, or if I'm talking to my spouse, but will you help me when you see it or sense it? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes I won't even realize that I'm kind of drifting off. And so I was talking with a principal about what if we just came up with a signal with our kids? Do it something fun. Mm-hmm. You be very transparent, be very honest, but then ask our own children for help in that. So let's come up with a signal that we can give daddy, that when daddy does this, you give him the signal and it'll snap daddy back into being more present in the moment, especially when it comes to our own families. I worry right now, a lot of principals and school administrators are just feeling really guilty because of the amount of time they're gone right now at this time of the year, the long hours they're putting in. And I do worry about not just the stress, but what types of issues that creates in our own marriages, and the guilt that comes upon us. So, I certainly, it was something I wish I would have paid attention to a lot more when I was younger. And those are the types of things I do worry about. So that's one thing I would suggest. And then I'll share a couple things just about the school day here in a second. But Joe, thoughts on that? I know you as obviously not just as a superintendent, but the work that you do outside with other schools and so forth, the pacing can sometimes kind of be crazy a little bit. And it's not only for our own health, but the health of our families and our own and the people we love the most that we often neglect the most.
Yeah, I think we talked about, when I talk to groups about, we talk about the idea, what are the first 5 things that you do when you get to school every day to put yourself in the right mindset to be present and engaged for the people that you serve at school. But are you doing that when you go home too? What are the first 5 things that you do at home to make sure that the people the people at home, that you still feel connected and that they know that you're there for them in that spot too? And there are days that I'm just way awful at that. And I think the problem is when you get farther away from it, it's hard to catch up to it. So I think if you can put yourself in the right mindset to be present and engaged for the people that you're with, wherever that is, then it changes the conversation about what you do.
At the same time, this conversation, this certain individual was talking about just how they were having a hard time managing their time at school, that it was just, so he was indicating that by the end of the day, right, he would walk into his office and, not only does he have a slew of emails, but he just has a pile of work because he's trying to be intentional and be invisible and be accessible and being available. It's one of those things, right? And this is where I do worry about our school leaders. And, when I talk to teachers, I remind them, listen, you have to look at it too, right? We have to be honest. And sometimes even as teachers or as staff, we sometimes complain both ways and it catches our school leaders. So this one's I'm kind of shouting out for our teachers, just to remember is, it's finding that balance between both, right? We can't say you're never in our classrooms, right? You can't say, hey, you're never in our classrooms, you're never visible, you're always in your office. And then at the same time, we turn around and say, well, every time I go to my office or your office, you're not there and I need to find you. I need to talk to you. Right. It's that's what our leaders are struggling with. And so, again, I go back and I say to our leaders, have those conversations with your staff.
Yep.
Say to them, listen, here's the struggle I'm having. I'm just being really honest. And this is where I'm going to need some help. I want to be accessible, but there's also times I'm going to have to be in my office. And I don't want you getting frustrated that you come to the office, I'm not available, because they too only have certain times of the day that a teacher can reach an administrator. Before school, prep time, lunchtime, after school. And so they're limited in their windows of opportunity. And so when I was working with this principal, I had shared with him, what if we were just a little bit more strategic in a couple ways? One, what if we sat down and actually mapped this out? What would it look like, right? So where can we be a little bit more strategic and being more accessible and have the best of both worlds, that staff can be available? So it's almost kind of like those office hours, but communicate those office hours. When will you for sure be in your office that people know you'll be there? And you can also do some of that work that's piling up. So almost create your own office hours for yourself. Block that office hours off to work with your secretary, your administrative assistant, and say, hey, during this time, it's for our staff, not for phone calls, not for parents. I've got other times for that, but for our staff, I want to be really intentional. What if we communicated that? What if we problem solved together and worked through that? That would be one thing. Number 2, work with your administrative assistants, principals, to not block more than 2 meetings at a time in a row. When you go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, that's where we're going to get caught as leaders. That's when the work piles up. That's when I'm not getting to these emails. And so to be strategic and working with your admin assistant, say, hey, look, I don't want to do more than 2 meetings in a row, but if I do 2 meetings, after those 2 meetings, I need 30 minutes. Okay. And this is where I think a lot of leaders struggle, because they say, well, geez, I feel guilty. I feel like I should be out there. No. You can't be your best if the work is piling up and you're stressed out, because something's going to, you're going to pay a price for it somewhere at home or at school. There is nothing wrong as long as we're communicating to our staff and explaining the why behind it. Hey, when I get 2 meetings in a row and my administrative assistant says he's not available, it's because I'm trying to take care of the things that came up in those meetings, sometimes things that you asked me to do. And this allows me to be a little bit more prompt, allows me to be a little bit more intentional in getting those things done. And I think what happens simply by working through that is what we'll see is you won't be as overwhelmed and you won't have as many things piling up. So if you think about it, meeting, a little 30-minute break here, or even if it's a 15-minute break,
right.
To go quickly follow up what you said you were going to follow up in those emails or in those meetings, right? So it's an organizational benefit. You're not dropping the ball. You're not forgetting to do something. It's not piling up, because the more it piles up throughout the day, the more stressed we're going to be as leaders. So I would encourage leaders to be a little bit more intentional, strategic. 2 meetings in a row, plan yourself at least a 15-minute window to do the to-do list that you said you were going to do in those meetings. Plus, we know this happens. You leave a meeting, or you go to a meeting, and if you go to that third meeting, while you're in that third meeting, you know what you're doing? You're thinking about the other 2 meetings.
Yeah.
So our brain can only handle so much. So it was a good reminder again, is work with your staff, chunk yourself some office hours, communicate when you'll be available, explain the why behind it, ask for their help. And to me, that is effective leadership.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the only concern that I would have with the piece of it, or something that people have to keep in mind, is if you block off the time, but it's always the same time. It's like when you do your walks all the time that are at the same time, you see the same people that have the same break at the same time, that the same prep time at the same time, that have the same, like classes at the same time. You're seeing the same stuff. So I think part of that balance is trying to figure out when you're going to be available. Maybe you run it into a common planning time. Maybe you run it into, an overarching part of lunch or whatever the case may be, where more people can get to you if they need to. But I think we do have to be cognizant of if we're going to block a 9 to 9:30 or 9 to 10, when only 10% of our crew can connect with us at that time. I don't know if it's having as big an effect as we want it to, right? So
yeah, and that's a really good point, Joe, but that's my point. I wouldn't make that decision in isolation. That's why we say work with your staff.
Yeah.
Be intentional, be transparent, ask for their help. It's not you doing this in isolation. I still think it would get a better result, but it won't be the best result. The best result is that other people are a part of it and understand why you're doing it, and they're supportive of it. They're actually asking for the same thing.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. We would identify those issues, which we call those undercurrents. Where's the potential undercurrent going to come from? Oh, how would we address that? We'd rotate it. Hey, 1 hour, too much time. I tried it was too much time. 30 minutes up, still a little too much time. Maybe 15, 20 minutes seems to be the sweet spot. So some of this is trial and error, but as long as we're communicating, we're having those conversations, I do think it'll be a better benefit. I do worry, and I'll say this again, other people may not agree with me. I sometimes think this. We have to be careful as school and district leaders, that as servant leaders, and we want to, again, go back to the fixing it and to be available and to do everything for everybody. I do not think it's selfish that sometimes we have to say, look, I get it, but I too need some of that. I can't be an effective leader if I'm just doing all this. So again, I think it's the communication aspect that I worry sometimes that we lean more towards what the teachers need, but what do principals need? It shouldn't be an either or, right? We all need it because we're all there for the same purpose. We're there to support our students. We're there to support one another. And so again, I just worry that principals always seem to, let me rephrase it. Some principals feel the need to take on that load every time.
Yeah.
And again, it's not healthy. And as I always say, if you're not going to slow down, the good Lord will find a way to make you slow down. Well, and you won't have a choice anymore.
No, you won't. And then you're going to slow down anyway at that point. The common theme that we're talking about is how do we make sure that we take care of, what we're responsible to take care of, and make sure that we're seen in that direction. If we start doing things that are if we overwhelm ourselves beyond the scope of what we put in as our focus, as our vision, as where we want to move forward, if we overwhelm ourselves, what ends up happening is the thing that we set as the focus, as the intention, tends to get lost or it gets watered down. So the things that you said you were going to be about in that chair, like you say, Jimmy, in that chair, the things that you said you were going to be about, right? The things that you said you were going to do as the leader, then take a hit because we're dealing with all the other stuff. And then when you can't get to the stuff that you said you were going to do, you become
Mhm.
perceived as less of a leader in that space because you can't get to the things. Now not only do you feel like you're incompetent because you're not getting the stuff that you said you were going to get to, but the other thing is other people start looking at the perception going, oh, that's not kind of who he is. He said he was going to be this and he's not that. Well, they don't see all the other stuff that's happening, right? Because they're not in those meetings at the same time. It does hit your perception as the leader if you can't get to the things that you said you were going to do when you sat in that chair.
Yeah. So if there are individuals out there who would like to jump in the studio with us and talk a little bit about how you manage some of your time, take a look at the questions in the thread. Sue makes me laugh. I kind of chuckled inside when I saw that. She goes, I feel like I'm a deli counter, right? Serving number 23. Number 23, right? Absolutely. Again, and there are, there's something about, and sometimes those things aren't even need to be serious things. Sometimes they don't even need to be private. Sometimes those things can be handled out in a main office area, right? So if people are coming to the office for those office hours, you can also stand out in the main office and start there, greet people, have a conversation. Maybe it's just a quick thing they need to take. The benefit of that also is maybe less emails, but if it has a privacy or a private component to it, then we can just walk into the office, deal with it, and walk back out. So, but I certainly get that, Sue. So thank you for sharing that. And Christy, she asked the question, Joe, within that conversation, how do you manage delegation when the capacity of others is low too, right? So, Christy, one thing, again, these aren't perfect solutions. Joe and I don't have a monopoly on all of this, but certainly there are some things that I think will get us that better result. Number one, again, I always start with the why. That's where I start. Why are people not wanting to lead? Why are people not able to do the things we ask them to do? Why are people hesitating? Whatever that is. So, Christy, I always start with the relationship piece first to try to understand the why behind whatever the issue is that I either is brought to my attention or I recognize myself. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is just being really intentional in the conversation to try to build that trust and build that relationship. That would be the second thing I'd say. But the third thing I always look at is I'm a believer in frameworks, and delegation would be one of those frameworks that over time I began to understand that if I change me, right, if I change my approach, I'll get a better result. So, Christy, again, not necessarily going to fix your problem, but maybe we'll get a better solution or a better result. So here's one thing to think about. So the next time you're thinking about that individual that you're describing here, maybe try a little bit different approach. So number one, it's going to go have a conversation with the individual, ask them for their help, but we're not going to delegate because we already know this individual may or may not have the capacity to do what we're asking to do. So one of the things we're going to try is we're just going to simply tell them what we need them to do. See, again, communicate what we need from them. But the second part of that framework is not just to tell them what you need, but then show them what that looks like. And so to me, I'm a big believer in modeling. So if I'm going to ask somebody to do something, I need to show them with clarity what's the standard and how do I want it done. The third step of that framework then is that I'm going to observe them. Because when they go to do it, I want to have eyes on them, because when I observe them, then I can begin to better understand where their deficiencies are and where they might need some additional support. That then leads into the fourth step of the framework, which is the feedback. And then that 3 and 4 together begins that coaching loop, that coaching cycle. And I would stay in that coaching cycle with individuals until they feel they have the confidence to then do this on their own. And so I would just encourage you to maybe kind of sit down, write it out, sit down with the individual and be very clear how you're going to do this. And even if it helps that individual because you follow that process, and if you do it again, and if you do it again, eventually you'll be able to release them. They'll have the confidence. In other words, you're building their capacity. It's like teaching again, right? And then you've made a difference with that individual. And then you just repeat the process again. And so if I can work with 2 or 3 people this year, we know how quickly 3 or 4 years goes by. And the next thing you know, I'm slowly building my capacity. And if I'm really strategic, I can then use these people to also help build that capacity. It doesn't have to be me doing the modeling and the observation, the feedback and the coaching cycle. It can be one of the people that I've worked with. Again, it's asking people for help, but being really intentional in that.
Yeah, and if we want to build capacity lead, Christy raises a really great question in terms of the capacity of others is low as well. A lot of times because they're overwhelmed, obviously, and we may not even know what that situation looks like. So there are often times that we kind of bring a third person. If somebody asks and they need some help with something, we bring a third person and say, could we do this as a group, or could you share this with somebody else, or another person involved in. So now you're building more capacity to lead, and you're not feeling like one person's taking on something that's just really overwhelming to them. Is there any help that we can get you with that? If when you know and understand your staff well enough to say, who's really good at that, let's have a connection with these, two other people, and let's see if we can help move each other forward, because they're going to have better suggestions than I'm going to have. And now we can kind of, like you said, loop that back. And now we've created more capacity to lead. So involving others and saying, everybody's got strengths. JC was mentioning, know your team member strengths. Everybody on your staff has a strength, right? And the more that we know what those strengths are, not only in terms of what they can do for kids in the classroom, but for the building as a whole, we can start connecting people along the way. So people don't feel like they're ever isolated and alone in this one specific situation. There's always people that can be part of a conversation, even if that doesn't mean that it turns into they're going to take on the project together. That might be a 15-minute conversation with somebody who's done it before. That might be a 15-minute conversation with somebody who's got kids and the thing that they're talking about going forward with. That might be a conversation with somebody who's just, has a real interest in that area. Whatever it is, we can start to loop more people into the conversation and then build more capacity to lead, so you don't feel like you're isolated in that spot. And you, as the leader in that place, don't feel like you always have to take on that information or take on that conversation.
Absolutely. Joe, I like the reminder, right? A couple of people have shared that they do share their calendar with their staff and seem that they get a pretty good result from that. So that's another strategy that for those leaders right now that are just trying to be a little bit more effective in their communication and really be transparent, sharing calendars can be very powerful. They have an idea. And again, I have talked to people who have also done that, who have also had a negative experience from that, right? So again, it doesn't necessarily work in all environments for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
But again, it is a reminder that if you haven't tried that, that could be something to try and you might get a better result. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, and you'll find other ways to do that. So again, suggestions and experiences that people have sometimes work and sometimes don't work for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So don't assume that because I don't want to do that because then this is going to happen. But you don't know that, right? So try it first, right? Again, I still will always go back. As long as we're communicating, the theme is to communicate. Lack of communication or ineffective communication creates so many issues in our schools. It just does. And the reason is because when we don't communicate, bad things are going to happen. We're going to drop the ball. We're going to make people scramble. So now, because we didn't communicate and now we're communicating at the last minute, then people get frustrated with us because it creates an inconvenience for them, or they worry that, man, I'm taking the hits, or it's my credibility, but I didn't even cause the issue. I'm trying to pick up the pieces for somebody else. And then I'm in a quandary because I don't want to throw somebody else under the bus, but then I don't want this person to think that I'm the problem. So lack of communication will create all sorts of issues. So communicate, and explain the why behind it, and just be really intentional in that. And again, my experience is you'll just get a better result. Maybe not perfect, won't necessarily fix the problem, but we can't fix every problem.
Right. And more people will be involved in it. When
That's
more people are involved in it, then you don't feel like it doesn't feel as isolating. Even if the result isn't what you want it to be, people know how you got to that piece.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's a big deal. We got to figure out a way that we can make, turn that balance into, a positive for everybody. And sometimes that means just setting the boundaries to what it looks like. Like if we go away for a long weekend and then we send our staff an email saying, hey, don't check your email for the next 4 days. You're not going to see anything from an administrator for the next 4 days, right? Like it's all like, if you check your email, there will be nothing from an administrator. So don't check your email, because otherwise they're going to check their email all day. What if I miss something? Yeah. So, but conversely, what that also tells people is if you email somebody, you're not going to get an email back either. Right. So that gives our principals permission to back away from the day-to-day rat race as well. Right. So we got to be able to do both for our groups. And sometimes just identifying this is what the parameters are for the next 4 days. Yeah. So you just take time for your family, take time for yourself, get away from it. really, find your purpose again. So I think that's a big piece of what you're doing.
This isn't the best solution, but I'm laughing. And then, Jason, we'll get to your question here in a second. Jason, thank you for throwing that in. That's an important question. I'll let Joe take that on first here in a second. Amy, I'm not saying this is the best solution, but Amy says, I wish there was a way that I could mark my text as unread, right? Like we can with emails, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we can. I mean, if we can, I haven't figured that out and I haven't done that. But you know what I did do, Amy, is I created just a text that says me. And so I just copy and I text it back to myself. And it just stays unread. So I have a me, that's me. I'm texting myself. So I just take the message so I don't forget it because I can't do unread. So I copy it, paste it, text it to me, and that's me. So then there's your unread text message, Amy. So anyway.
I never thought about it that
kind
way.
of silly, but that's what I do so I don't forget those text messages because when they're coming at me 100 miles an hour, I'm on the road or something, I don't want to forget. I just text it back to myself. So I have a me, and I'm just texting myself.
I got no problem with that. There's got to be somebody.
Because I'm a narcissist, okay?
Hey, I don't know about that. There's got to be somebody on here.
Different things, people.
There's got to be somebody on here like a tech director or something that can tell us, like, how can we make that happen? Like somebody, there's got to be some sort of algorithm. There's got to be some sort of assistant, like whatever it is. I don't. Just something's got to. You don't need to text yourself, Jimmy. I mean,
it's the idea,
right? You got more text from yourself than anybody else.
Before the emails had the unread, what did I do? I just forwarded it back to myself. It's the same concept.
It makes perfect. It actually makes perfect sense. Actually, that's a really good idea.
Amy said it was clever. Okay,
hey, I'll tell you. See, I'm gonna make fun of it.
Fills my cup. See how Amy fills my cup?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'm gonna make fun of it all day. But guess what I'm gonna do as soon as we get done? I'm gonna set that up so I can do it to myself. Hey, it's the way that it works, man. I'm telling you.
That's right. All right, Joe. Jason has a question in here. I don't know if you want to take that on real quick and take a look at that.
Well, I think the first thing that I would ask Jason, honestly, is like, have you set up the parameters for what it's supposed to look like? So I think that's the biggest deal. Is if you say you want it to shine a little bit more, well, is that you saying that that's what you want it to do? Is that other people saying that that's what you want? Have you set up the parameters under which you're saying this is what it's supposed to look like? Have you talked to them as a group and said, what are these non-negotiables? How are we making sure that the priorities are taken care of? Are they high traffic areas? Is it that they want pieces of the building to shine a little bit more because other people are in the building during that time? I think about like our commons, and our staff does a phenomenal job of making sure that the commons area, when people walk in, it just looks like this weekend with the alumni tournament. I told her, this is the spot, man. This is the spot. Make sure that this is the spot. When people walk in, I want them to look in it. I want them to look around and go, holy cow, what's going on here? This is fantastic. So I think we have to just have the parameters set up of, this is what we want. This is what it's supposed to look like. And if we talk to our director about that, if we talk to the team about it, say, what do we want to make sure that it looks like? If there are things that are not getting done, there's probably a reason, right? There's probably a reason that you may not know anything about. Again, go back to communicating with each other. And if you have the conversation with them about what's going on, is there something that I can help get to those spots? Because I want to make sure that when people come into the building, it looks great. Because not only does it look good for the school, that looks great for you as the staff that's contributing to that. So I always try to bring it back. We're trying to make you look good. We're trying to make you look good. What can we do to make you look good? How can we make sure that what you're doing gets amplified? That kind of stuff. And if we can keep coming back to those things, then I think we're in a better spot. But the first thing is identify what what are the parameters under which, what are the non-negotiables? What are you making sure that everybody's on board with? And then kind of move from there.
Joe, I'm just going to take you down a little walk right now. Okay.
I don't know if I like this.
You ready for a little walkabout right now?
Yeah, okay. Please go ahead.
Let's see. First of all, Joe, I consider you one of my best friends.
I agree. Okay? I agree.
But
your check comes into me every month. The friendship check, I get it every month from you. I love it. I buy all kinds of gum and candy with it. Continue.
I hope our audience understands how painful this friendship is. All right, let me say this. Joe, there are still some things that I'm not sure you know about me.
Okay.
So give me a moment on the couch.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Joe, did you know that I was this far away from being an FBI agent? Did you know that?
I didn't know that. You would have
did
been
not,
awful.
did
You
ya?
talk about everything. You would. There's no way that you would have been able to hold any of that information.
I was right there. I had my date. I was going to Quantico, Virginia. Yeah.
I didn't know
I'll tell you
that.
that story later someday, but I was right there. That's really not the story I want to tell you, though. That's
Yeah.
just a warm up. I want to test it. Second one, Joe, did you know that I was a custodian for 3 years? Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah, I think you did. I think I
You
might
told
share
me
that
that.
with you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
for audience members, this is going to go back to Jason's question. Jason, I was a custodian at a chemical plant for 2 years when I was 18, 19 years old. Okay. And then I was a custodian at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics for a year. And in those 3 years, it taught me a lot just about the importance of valuing all people in the organization. And the reason that is because in my first job, I had an amazing boss who valued me in the work that I did as a custodian. I took a lot of pride because my father, too, was a custodian. He was actually a custodian at the high school where I first went to, the community I first lived in. And as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, my father, in case you guys are wondering, violated every child labor law there was back then, because in 1972, you could actually take your kids to work and make them work and nobody gave a crap, right? OSHA, what the hell's that? Pacific, Atlantic? No, OSHA, not ocean, right? And so, when I worked at the chemical plant, I never forget this, Jason. So here's a suggestion, and this is something I carried on with me in my own job. He took all the custodians and he took us for a tour and he walked through all the plants that we were going to be working in. And he shared a vision for what he wanted that plant to look like. He shared with us the exact areas in which he wanted us to make sure that we always emphasize first and we took care of first. Kind of Joe's point. Where are the areas that for you personally, when community walks in or parents walk in, what's that location, first of all, that you want it to shine? And if we look at it, just even as we walk towards the building, right? What's the outside? What do the bushes look like? What's the facility look like? Those types of things. But that walkabout for me, what it did for me was create very clear expectations on exactly how he envisioned this and what he wanted. But more importantly, ready for this? He asked us. Yeah. He asked us about it as well. And so what I took from that, Jason, is I would do that in every one of my schools that I worked in, is I would walk with the whole team. But then, as many of us do, is I would meet with the head custodian once a week, but I would do it a little differently. Where most people will meet with their custodian in the office, I met with my custodian on a walkabout. So Steve Palmer and Dave Dooley and these people, I would walk the building with them during our meeting. And we would just walk and we would look at things. And I would say to him, so talk to me about this hall. What do you think? And he would say, well, boss, here's what I'm thinking about doing. I said, that's freaking awesome, right? That's awesome. I love it, right? Or we'd be walking up the stairs. I said, did you notice? They said, what? Did you notice the cobwebs over in the corner? No, dang, right? And so it was for us just to kind of both of us to see it, right? He'd see something, I'd see something. And here's what I loved. What eventually happened is he would literally walk by and say, hey, boss, see this? By the way, I'm going to take care of this mark over here on the wall. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fill this in. I'm going to put some new plaster in. It was so awesome. He began to take pride because I was taking time to invest it, to recognize his work and the work of the team. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple things I would say. Do a walkabout with the team. I would do that quarterly, just so you know. Mm-hmm. And I would do the weekly meeting. And again, you don't have to do it every time, but maybe even if one of the meetings per month is I would walk with my custodian, whoever that head custodian is, or day custodian or night custodian, whoever, just one-on-one, and just do the meeting as a walkabout. Mm-hmm. And it just was really powerful. And it's a strategy I used, and I believe it was really effective. And Dave Dooley, who I love to death to this day, became honestly one of my dearest friends because of those relationships. So I'm sure it's not a surprise, but it always comes down to it's a people business, people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's how we invest time in people. It's the greatest gift we can give others is that gift of time. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Jason. But thanks for asking the question, my friend.
Man, I got to tell you, I think that's where we closed today. I mean, honestly, that was like, it comes back to how are we making sure that we take care of people, take care of ourselves, but really the relationships win. And not only, you didn't even say it in that conversation, but how you communicate and how you value communication in that spot, creating great relationships and communicating well, which is how we started the conversation with the community, right? You create great relationships with the community by communicating well, by making sure that they know that they're a part of the work that you do, even though they're not here every day, and understanding that there's a connection that we want to make. So those are some things that I really think that that we should consider moving forward as we start thinking about what leadership looks like in the next week.
And there's one thing, and we all do it, right? We have an event, we have a banquet, we have a little get together, and what do we typically do? We say to the custodians, hey, take the food, and they appreciate that, right? But I always felt like I was throwing them scraps, to be honest with you. And so again, it's just being intentional on those meetings, for that night crew. Yeah, I'd stay till 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock and order dinner, and we'd sit in our room and in the conference room in the back. I can see it right now with the whole custodian team, and just have dinner with them, and how much they appreciate, because it was not leftover scraps. It was, hey, he did this. This was for us, right? This is just intentionally for us. So there's all these little ways that we can do things when we're just really intentional and investing in people. So I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Jim Hammond. I see Jim Hammond. Hey, one more while we're on this whole confession thing. Joe, I'm sure you know this, but when I went to the University of Iowa, I lasted 6 weeks and then I dropped out. Yep, I'm a loser. And then Jim Hammond, who's on the thread right now, who I had no idea was going to be on here. Jim Hammond and I would literally drive every day and commute, because I moved back home. We would commute to Iowa City back and forth, and I just saw Jim Hammond could jump on here, and it just immediately brings up bazillion memories of him driving to the University of Iowa, making that commute every day. And hopefully Jim won't share this with you, but I did make the commute the entire semester. But don't tell my parents, I never went to class because I didn't want to go to college. Oh, don't worry. They found out in December, because back then they still mailed the transcripts to your house.
Well, I got to tell you, I got one in college right now, and I got one going. We better not do that.
Mijo, what is this? You want to explain this?
What's that? Yeah, right. I know. I don't even know what's going to happen. Like I said, I got one in college right now and one going. And if they don't go to class, we're going to have a conversation about that, I think.
All right, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the weekly show. We hope you will join us again next week. We hope you'll invite a friend. And remember, don't hesitate to reach out at any time. It's just not on the weekly show. Encourage your people to sign up for the YouTube channel. If there are topics that you would like us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to Joe or I. We'll make sure we'll bring those topics up next week. If you're asking us, when will we be back? We don't know. It'll be either Saturday or Sunday. It's called the weekly show, people. We didn't say the Saturday show or the Sunday show because we have no idea, but we'll figure it out next week.
Everybody's traveling.
That's right. God bless everyone. Thank you so much. Make it a great day. And thank you. Peace out, everybody.
Take care. Go Crickets.